Welcome to Whisper May, a place where stories heal your heart. Here, every story is told from the first-person perspective, the voices that were silenced, the secrets that were hidden, the heartbreak that almost broke us. I'm Whisper May, and I share real-life tales of love, betrayal, family drama, and life-changing secrets. Stories that will make you cry, make you gasp, and sometimes even make you laugh through the pain. Imagine discovering a betrayal so deep it shakes the foundation of your life, or a secret so shocking it changes everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. These are the stories I tell, slow, cinematic, and emotional. Stories where the pain is real, but so is the redemption, where every heartbreak comes with a lesson, and every betrayal leads to growth. Whether it's family secrets, infidelity, revenge, or the quiet strength it takes to walk away, you'll find it here. So if you're ready to feel, to reflect, and to witness lives transformed by the choices we make, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to Whisper May, listen closely, lean in, and let these stories remind you that even in the darkest moments, there is hope, there is healing, and there is truth waiting to be heard. I knew something was wrong the moment she hugged me, because she held on just a little too tight. That thought didn't hit me until much later, when the shock had settled into something heavier, something that felt like a hand pressed against my chest, making each breath just a little harder. But in that moment, standing on the porch of my childhood home in Tennessee, her arms wrapped around me like we were closer than we'd ever been, I remember thinking, that isn't her hug. Not my sister-in-law, not Jasmine. Her hugs were usually light, almost airy, more of a pat on the back than anything full and lingering. But that day, the first morning of our family reunion, she held on to me like she needed something, like she was bracing herself, or maybe like she was hiding something. I should have listened to my body. I always tell myself that now. But back then, I just smiled and said, "It's good to see you too, Jazz." And she smiled back, too wide, too bright, as if the sun itself had burst behind her teeth. The kind of smile people force when they've already decided to lie. If you've never been to a Southern family reunion, then Lord help you, you're missing a slice of life that can't be served twice. There's a kind of magic in it. Heat rising off the ground, cicadas humming like they've been hired to sing background, the smell of barbecue drifting through the air every time someone opens the grill. Our family takes reunions seriously. We don't do those quick, hello, how you been events in some rented hall. No, ma'am. Ours last 3 full days. People sleep wherever they fit. On couches, on air mattresses, in guest bedrooms that suddenly hold enough luggage to stock a small airport terminal. And this year? Well, this year was supposed to be special. It was our first time celebrating without Grandma Lucille. She passed the previous fall, quietly, in her sleep, hands folded across her chest, like she was finally resting from a lifetime of cooking, loving, and praying over all of us. She wasn't the loudest person in the room, but she was the center of it. Her absence felt like a chair pulled out from under the whole family. So when Jasmine volunteered to host the reunion, my brother swore she was doing it in Grandma's honor. "Jazz got it handled," he told me over the phone. "She wants to make it real nice this year, for Grandma." That warmed my heart at the time, because all my life I'd tried real hard to treat Jasmine like a sister. She married into the family 10 years ago, and though she could be sharp sometimes, a little defensive, I always looked for the good in her. I assumed she did the same with me. So when she said she wanted to host, I believed it came from love. Maybe that was my first mistake, believing she felt what I felt. The morning of the reunion was busy in that happy, chaotic way families have when they're all trying to be helpful but end up moving in circles instead. Kids running in and out the house, screen doors slamming every few minutes, aunties fussing about the heat, uncles arguing over who ruined the grill last year. And me? I was in Grandma's old room, unpacking the few things I brought: soft summer dresses, my Sunday shoes, and the jewelry box my grandmother left me. Inside it sat the one thing I held on to like a piece of her soul: her heirloom ring. It was a gold band with a small emerald, a little worn from decades of her hands working dough and folding laundry and pressing against the Bible pages she read every night. The ring wasn't worth much money, but in meaning, it was priceless. It was the last thing she ever gave me. She slipped it into my hand the night before she passed. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "You got my spirit, baby. Keep this close." And I did. Always. That morning, I opened the backs just to look at it for a second, to steady myself before the long day ahead, to feel like she was with me. I touched the gem with my thumb, whispered a small prayer, then tucked the ring back inside and closed the lid. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last moment I'd see it where it belonged. By noon, the house was full. Laughter bounced off the walls, the kitchen smelled like ribs and jasmine rice. Someone turned on old soul music, and a few of my cousins had already started dancing barefoot on the back porch. I walked out with a tray of lemonade, weaving between relatives, greeting people I hadn't hugged since last Thanksgiving. And everywhere I went, Jasmine was there. Too cheerful, too busy, too helpful. At one point, she brushed past me, nearly knocking the tray from my hands. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly, not meeting my eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked. She blinked a little too fast. "Of course, just a lot going on today." Then she walked off pretending to straighten chairs that didn't need straightening. There it was again. The feeling that something under her smile wasn't sitting right. I tried to shake it off. Family events bring all kinds of pressure, and Lord knows hosting isn't easy. But as the afternoon went on, I kept noticing small things, little cracks in her mask. Her voice trembled when she gave instructions. Her hands fidgeted when she talked. She kept looking at her phone like she was waiting for news she didn't want to hear. Something was weighing on her, something she hadn't told anyone. But I didn't know what it was. Not yet. It was later that evening, sun low and warm behind the trees, when the first real sign reached me. I went upstairs to change my shoes before dinner, humming softly and enjoying a rare moment of quiet. I opened the door to Grandma's old room, expecting to see everything just the way I left it. But the moment I stepped inside, my body froze. My jewelry box, the one I had placed neatly on the dresser, was sitting open, wide open. My pulse skipped. I walked toward it slowly, like something dangerous was waiting. Inside, empty velvet. The ring was gone. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A coldness crawled up my spine. My hands trembled as I searched the dresser, the floor, every corner of the room. Nothing. My heirloom ring, my grandmother's last gift, was missing. And deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge yet, I already knew who had touched it. But I wasn't ready to believe it. Not then. Not at the start of a reunion meant to honor the woman I lost. So I whispered to myself, trying to calm the storm rising in my chest, "Lord, please let me be wrong." I closed the door behind me, leaning against it as if my entire body needed the support. The hallway smelled faintly of Jasmine's floral perfume, mixed with the lingering barbecue from the afternoon. My mind raced a million miles an hour, trying to convince itself that maybe, just maybe, I was mistaken. Maybe I'd misplaced the ring. Maybe someone else in the family had seen it and moved it for safekeeping. Lord, I hope that was it. I tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. At the dinner table, everyone laughed and told stories about Grandma Lucille, passing plates around, sharing memories of her famous peach cobbler and the time she scolded my uncle for nearly burning the kitchen down. I smiled and laughed along, but my fingers kept twitching under the table. My eyes kept drifting toward Jasmine, who sat 2 seats down, cutting rolls with unusually sharp precision. She didn't look at me once. Every time I tried to catch her gaze, she looked away, just a little too quickly. My chest tightened every time I saw her fidget or tap her fingers against the table. After dinner, I offered to help clear the table. Jasmine's eyes lit up like she was relieved for the distraction. "Yes, please. I can't keep up with all of this." She smiled again, but her hands shook as she picked up silverware. I didn't notice it at first, the small tremor, but after a second glance, my stomach dropped. I'd seen nervous hands before, but there was something different about hers. Uneasy. Almost guilty. I excused myself to grab a glass of water from the kitchen. The quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall filled the silence. And that's when I noticed it. A small piece of paper sticking out from the side of the counter, just under the edge. I bent down, curiosity prickling my chest, and pulled it out. It was a receipt. A pawn receipt. The handwriting wasn't immediately familiar, but the store's name, one I'd never heard of, jumped out at me in bold print. My stomach turned to lead. Could it really be? I tried to shake it off, telling myself, "No, you don't know anything yet. Don't jump to conclusions." I placed the paper back where I found it, pretending I'd never seen it, but my mind refused to let it go. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed or retreated to the living room for cards, I found myself standing in Jasmine's room, her door slightly ajar, the soft glow of her bedside lamp illuminating the neatly folded laundry she had stacked. I didn't go in. I didn't touch anything, but the urge to peek just a little gnawed at me. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional whisper of the wind through the trees. I pressed my palm to the wall, trying to steady my racing heart. My grandmother had taught me to trust my instincts, and right now, every instinct screamed that something was very wrong. The next morning, I tried to act normal. The family gathered on the porch for breakfast, coffee, pancakes, laughter spilling into the soft Tennessee sun. Jasmine was already outside, bustling, carrying plates and checking on everyone, her smile seemingly restored. But the tension under her eyes hadn't disappeared. As the morning went on, I noticed little things. Too many trips to the guest room, the occasional glance at her phone, and a whispered phone call she quickly ended when she saw me approaching. Each little act built an invisible wall between us. At one point, I decided to confront my own fears instead of her. I went to Grandma's old room and searched again for the ring. Every drawer, every corner, every nook. Nothing. My heart sank deeper with every passing minute. It wasn't just the ring, it was the betrayal that it represented. Grandma had trusted me to keep her memory alive through that heirloom, and now, someone I considered family, someone I had welcomed into my heart, had stolen it. By late afternoon, I could no longer ignore the gut-wrenching realization. The person I trusted most in this family reunion, the one I thought of as a sister, had taken it. I went to sit quietly on the porch, trying to breathe, trying to remind myself to stay calm. Birds chirped in the distance. A soft breeze carried the scent of jasmine and pine. Everyone else was inside playing cards or napping, and there I sat, gripping my knees, listening to the faint laughter echo through the house, wondering how much longer I could hold the secret in without shattering. I wanted to confront her immediately, to yell, to demand the ring back, to let the hurt pour out in words loud enough for everyone to hear. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed proof. And so I waited, watching, listening, praying I was wrong. But deep inside, I already knew I wasn't. The next morning, the house was quiet again, except for the distant hum of the washing machine and the faint creak of the stairs. Everyone else had already gone out to the yard to help set up for the afternoon's picnic games. I stayed behind, lingering in Grandma's old room one more time, just to be sure. The jewelry box sat where I'd left it the night before, closed, neat, unassuming. But it felt empty, hollow. I ran my fingers over the velvet top as if touching it could somehow summon the presence of the ring back into my hands. Nothing. I tried to shake off the fear that had lodged itself deep in my chest. Maybe Jasmine had found it earlier and was just keeping it safe, as families sometimes did. But deep down, I knew. My gut knew. Something about the way she'd hugged me, the way she moved around the house, the way she fidgeted when she thought no one was looking. It all added up. I decided to keep watch. Not in a way that would make anyone suspicious, but subtle, quietly. Observing her movements, listening to her conversations from a distance, seeing if her behavior revealed more than she intended. By mid-morning, I noticed something strange. Jasmine kept disappearing, small pockets of time when she was supposedly helping with preparations or checking on the supplies. Each time she returned, she looked more tense, more careful, as if she'd just been caught doing something she shouldn't have. It was during one of those moments, while she was supposedly arranging the tablecloths in the dining room, that I overheard her whispering to someone on the phone. I need it gone before they notice. No, not a word to anyone, I swear. Yes, I know. I'll get it done today. The words made my blood run cold. Gone. Not a word to anyone. I didn't need to hear more. My hands shook, my chest tightened, and I pressed my back against the wall, closing my eyes for a brief moment. I wanted to run, to scream, to demand answers immediately, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not without knowing the full truth. The rest of the morning passed in a haze. Jasmine smiled and laughed at the right moments, helped elderly relatives to their seats, carried trays of food, but every movement, every gesture now screamed guilt. My heart ached. I wanted to believe she was still the sister I thought I knew, but every instant, every fiber in my body told me otherwise. By lunchtime, I decided I couldn't just wait. I needed a closer look at what she was hiding. When everyone went outside for a game of horseshoes, I lingered inside the house. My footsteps were silent on the wooden floors, careful not to alert her. I walked past the kitchen and down the hall to the guest room she'd been disappearing into. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear her moving around inside, shuffling papers, the quiet clink of metal against metal. My stomach twisted as I peered inside. On the desk, I saw a small pile of receipts, envelopes, and my heart skipped. There it was, the familiar glint of gold. The ring. She wasn't just hiding it, she was preparing to sell it. I stepped back, pressing my hand to my mouth to stifle the sudden gasp that threatened to escape. I wanted to storm in, to grab it back, to shout. But something stopped me. Something that felt like Grandma herself whispering in my ear, reminding me to act with dignity. I waited. I watched Jasmine leave the room briefly, phone in hand. I slipped inside, carefully lifting the jewelry box. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The ring was there, delicate and precious, reflecting the light through the window. I held it as if it were a living thing, whispering softly, "I've got you. I won't let anyone take you."
Then I noticed something else. A small note tucked beneath the box, hastily written. "I need this now. I'll pay back. I swear." A confession, almost. My stomach churned. Not only had she stolen from me, from Grandma, from the trust we shared, but she'd done it knowingly, with full awareness of the betrayal. I felt a strange mix of anger, heartbreak, and sorrow. I wanted to hate her completely, but I also knew, deep down, she was struggling. The note hinted at desperation, a secret struggle she hadn't revealed to anyone. A gambling habit, a need for quick cash. I realized then that this wasn't just about theft. It was about broken trust, hidden pain, and the consequences of choices made in secret. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I kept the ring safe, slipping it back into the jewelry box and hiding it under my clothes when Jasmine wandered close. I couldn't confront her yet. Not in front of family, not without a plan. By evening, my mind was made up. I would expose the truth quietly, carefully. I would protect myself, the family, and Grandma's memory. And somehow I would ensure Jasmine faced the consequences of her actions, but with dignity, not cruelty. For now, though, I sat quietly on the porch, the ring heavy in my pocket, thinking about the family I loved, the woman I trusted, and the painful reality that betrayal sometimes comes from the people closest to you. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the yard, I made a silent vow. I would not let this ruin me. I would not let this ruin Grandma's memory. And I would see this through, no matter what it took.
That evening, the house had settled into the soft hum of post-dinner chatter. Cousins were laughing in the living room, cards shuffled across the coffee table, the aroma of coffee lingering in the air. I sat quietly on the edge of the porch, the weight of the hidden jewelry box in my bag pressing into my hip, my heart hammering with each passing second. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The truth had to come out. I had to see it with my own eyes, confront it directly. I followed Jasmine when she slipped away from the living room, pretending to check on dessert, but heading instead toward the guest room she'd claimed as her office. I paused outside the door, listening. Inside, she was on the phone again. Her voice was low, tense. "Yes, I'll get it today. I just need a little more time. I swear I'm working on it." The words hit me like a slap. My chest tightened. That's when I realized she wasn't just hiding the ring. She was planning to sell it, to pawn it for cash. My grandmother's ring, my memory of her, my family's trust, all dangling in her hands like a fragile thread. I stepped inside quietly, making sure she didn't see me. The jewelry box sat open on the desk, and there it was, my grandmother's emerald ring, glinting under the soft lamplight. I reached for it, and as my fingers brushed against the gold, Jasmine spun around, startled. Her eyes widened. Panic, guilt, and something raw flickered in them. I can explain," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Explain?" I asked, voice low but firm, trembling just enough to betray the storm inside me. "You stole my grandmother's ring. You planned to sell it. You lied to everyone, including me." She took a step back, hands raised like she was surrendering. I needed the money," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't thinking." "Not thinking?" I echoed, disbelief and hurt cutting through me. "Jasmine, this is my grandmother's memory. This was her last gift to me. Do you have any idea what this means?" Tears welled in her eyes. I know. I made a mistake. I have a problem. I gambled too much. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I didn't want to ruin the reunion." Her confession hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to scream, to shake her until the guilt settled, to make her feel even a fraction of what I felt. But I didn't. I took a deep breath and steadied my voice. "I felt hurt," I said.
Finally, the words heavy but calm. You've hurt me. You've hurt the family. And you've betrayed the trust that I placed in you. That's not something we can fix with an apology. I know, I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, she said, voice breaking. I stared at her for a long moment, my fingers tightening around the ring. My grandmother had taught me that dignity and restraint often speak louder than anger. So I held on to the ring, silent, letting the weight of the betrayal sink between us. I'm going to return this to its place, I said finally, placing the ring gently back into the box. And I want you to explain yourself to the family, quietly, without lying, no excuses. Her head dropped, shoulders slumping. I can't, she whispered. You can, I said firmly, and you will. Otherwise, the damage will be far worse. The next hour was tense. Jasmine sat quietly while I returned the jewelry box to its rightful place in Grandma's old room. I watched her carefully, studying her expression, noting every tremor, every small gesture of guilt and shame. She was human, flawed, broken in a way that didn't excuse her actions, but explained them. Later, when the family gathered for dessert, I confronted her. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in a corner of the kitchen. I told her to confess what happened, to speak the truth, and she did. The family listened in stunned silence. Some gasped, others shook their heads. I could feel the tension thick in the air. It was the kind of quiet that stretches between people after betrayal, when words have weight and trust hangs by a thread. Jasmine explained her gambling habit, her desperation, her plan to sell the ring to cover debts. She apologized, tears rolling down her cheeks. She promised to seek help. And just like that, the truth was out. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the secret was no longer hidden. Sorrow for the woman I thought I knew, who had allowed her struggle to lead her into betrayal. But most of all, sorrow for the fracture in our family, the quiet, invisible cracks that this revelation had caused. As I returned to Grandma's old room later that night, placing the ring back into the velvet box, I whispered a prayer. Lord, thank you for keeping it safe, and help us heal. Help her heal. The house was quiet again, but I knew the coming days would not be easy. Family bonds had been tested. Trust had been broken. And the work of mending hearts, ours and hers, was just beginning.
The morning after the confession, I woke with a heaviness in my chest. Sleep had come fitfully, dreams haunted by flashes of the ring glinting under the lamplight, Jasmine's trembling hands, and my own shock. I knew the reunion would continue, but for me, everything felt different. The warmth of family laughter, the clink of silverware, even the smell of cinnamon rolls, nothing was the same. I needed to act, but not impulsively. Grandma's lessons whispered in my mind: dignity, patience, reflection. I couldn't let anger dictate my steps. I had to be measured, careful, and intentional. I started by observing Jasmine. She moved through the house with her usual charm, helping relatives, smiling, joking, but every now and then, I caught the flicker of shame in her eyes. She wasn't pretending. She was walking the line between remorse and fear. And I needed to decide how I would respond without making the situation worse. First, I documented everything. I wrote down the timeline of events, every clue I'd noticed: the missing ring, the receipt, the whispered phone calls, her erratic behavior. My handwriting was deliberate, neat, almost ceremonial. It wasn't about evidence for punishment. It was about clarity for myself. Next, I confronted her privately, not angrily, but firmly. Jasmine, I said, my voice calm but unwavering, you need help. Not just with this, but with your habit. I can't fix that for you, but I can guide you. Are you willing to get help? Her lips quivered. I don't know where to start. she whispered. "I will help you, but only if you are honest and committed. No more secrets, no more lies. We'll figure this out together. But the first step is admitting you need help." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She nodded silently. After that, I focused on controlling the narrative around the family. I didn't want to shame her publicly. I didn't want relatives gossiping, turning the reunion into a battlefield. So I spoke calmly, discreetly, and truthfully when asked. Yes, there was an issue with the ring. Jasmine made a mistake. She's taking steps to make amends. No drama, no accusation, just fact, just honesty. I also created a plan to protect Grandma's heirlooms in the future. We decided that all jewelry of sentimental value would be kept safely with me during family gatherings, a neutral custodian. It was a small step, but it restored a sense of security, a buffer against future betrayal. That evening, I found myself alone on the porch, the sky turning pink and orange as the sun dipped behind the Tennessee hills. Jasmine came out quietly, sitting at the other end of the porch swing. We didn't speak for several minutes. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was reflective, a shared acknowledgement of the pain and the work ahead. Finally, she spoke. "I'm so sorry," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't deserve your trust. Not now, not ever. You don't have to deserve it right away, but you can earn it back, slowly. That's all any of us can do. Make choices that matter, one step at a time." She nodded, and for the first time that day, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. Over the next few days of the reunion, I watched her make small, deliberate steps toward accountability. She helped with cleanup without being asked. She apologized individually to anyone who had been affected. She didn't flaunt her contrition. It was quiet, sincere. Meanwhile, I kept my focus on the bigger picture, family healing. I organized a small memory circle one afternoon, inviting relatives to share stories of Grandma Lucille, memories that reminded us why we were together in the first place. No judgment, no gossip, just recollection. It was a gentle way to remind everyone of love, connection, and the bonds that withstand even betrayal. And throughout it all, I held the ring close, not just physically, but symbolically. It was a reminder of trust, of legacy, of what matters. I realized that this incident, painful as it was, had also shown me the importance of patience, compassion, and measured action. By the end of the reunion, I could see subtle shifts. Jasmine's shoulders weren't as tense, her eyes weren't constantly scanning for judgment. She had begun taking responsibility, and I had begun forgiving, not because the betrayal was small, but because holding on to anger would only harm me and the family further. That night, as the reunion drew to a close and the house emptied of guests, I sat quietly in Grandma's old chair, the ring in my hand. I whispered a prayer of gratitude, not just for the heirloom, but for clarity, for patience, and for the courage to act with dignity in the face of betrayal. For the first time in days, I felt a small, quiet sense of control. The storm had passed, not entirely, but enough to see the path forward. And that path, I realized, began with honesty, accountability, and measured, thoughtful action.
The day after I confronted Jasmine privately, the family reunion continued, but the energy had shifted. What had once been light laughter and playful teasing now carried a subtle undercurrent of tension. Everyone seemed to sense that something important had happened, even if they didn't know the full story. I spent the morning quietly checking on my relatives, making sure the children were fed and entertained, while Jasmine moved through the house cautiously, helping wherever she could without drawing attention. She was visibly different, less confident, more measured, more aware of her actions. I could see the weight of guilt on her shoulders. Eventually, I realized that the truth could no longer remain behind closed doors. The ring wasn't just a personal matter, it was a symbol of family trust, and the betrayal had ramifications that could not be ignored. I gathered the adults together in the living room, everyone settling into couches and chairs, the hum of conversation dying down as they noticed my serious expression. "I need to share something with you all," I began, my voice calm but firm. "It's about the ring from Grandma Lucille's jewelry box, the heirloom that I've always kept safe." I paused, letting the silence sink in. "It was taken without my permission, and the person responsible is Jasmine." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Eyes widened, heads turned toward Jasmine, who sat frozen, hands folded tightly in her lap. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was desperate and I made a terrible mistake." The room was silent for a long moment, the weight of her confession settling over everyone. My uncle leaned forward, frowning, while my cousins exchanged worried glances. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, eyes glistening with disappointment. "I know what she did was wrong," I continued, holding her gaze to show both firmness and compassion. "But she has admitted her mistake and she is taking steps to make amends. She's seeking help for a gambling problem that led to this situation." Aunt Lorraine, sitting on the far couch, shook her head slowly. "I can't believe this. Stealing from family, from Grandma's memory? That's a serious betrayal." "Yes, I agree. It is. And that's why we need to address it properly. Jasmine will be accountable, but shaming her publicly won't repair the harm done. We'll support her in getting help, but we also need to protect our family, our trust, and Grandma's legacy." Over the next hour, Jasmine spoke candidly about her struggles, her guilt, and her plans to make restitution. She promised to seek professional help for her gambling and to repay any financial damage that she had caused. Her humility and sincerity softened some of the anger in the room, though not all of it. My role throughout the conversation was to mediate, to ensure that while the truth was known, it was delivered with dignity. I wanted the family to understand the seriousness of the betrayal, but also to see Jasmine as a flawed human being, not a villain. Later, on the porch, I overheard some relatives discussing the situation. Some were shocked, some were sympathetic, and some were quietly judging. But the conversation wasn't destructive, it was reflective. They asked questions about her gambling, about how such mistakes happen, about accountability and forgiveness. By the afternoon, a shift began to occur. While the betrayal could not be undone, the open acknowledgement and Jasmine's willingness to face consequences created space for healing. Cousins who had been tense earlier began to relax. My aunt offered to help Jasmine find resources for her gambling. My mother suggested a family counseling session after the reunion. Even Jasmine herself seemed lighter, though still burdened by guilt. She moved more openly, smiled cautiously, and participated in family activities without the need to mask her shame. I understood then that public consequences don't always mean punishment or humiliation. Sometimes consequences are quiet, measured, and restorative, meant to teach lessons, rebuild trust, and guide people back to integrity. As I looked around the table at my relatives, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the pain that had been caused, relief that truth and accountability had been honored, and hope that with careful steps, forgiveness, and self-reflection, our family could emerge stronger and more aware of the fragile beauty of trust. The morning after the reunion ended was quiet, almost peaceful. The house felt empty, but not in a sad way, more like a pause, a breath after a storm. I walked slowly through the rooms, noticing the little details that had once seemed ordinary. The worn rug in the living room, the faded curtains that Grandma had loved, the smell of coffee lingering in the kitchen. Each familiar thing grounded me, reminded me of the continuity of family, even in the face of betrayal. Jasmine approached me cautiously, holding a small envelope in her hands. She looked different, lighter somehow, as if unburdened by the secrecy that had haunted her for weeks. I wanted to start making amends," she said quietly. "I used some of the money I owed to repay the pawn shop. I'm enrolled in a support program for my gambling, and I'll continue therapy. I want to make this right, truly." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I could see her sincerity, her effort to step into accountability. Forgiveness wasn't immediate, but acknowledgement and action were the first steps. "Thank you," I said simply. "This is a start. Not everything will be fixed overnight, but you're taking responsibility. That matters more than anything else right now." Over the next few weeks, life slowly returned to a new rhythm. I instituted a few changes to prevent future betrayals. Grandma's heirlooms were stored safely, family gatherings were planned with clear boundaries, and we agreed on open communication about finances and responsibilities. More importantly, I worked on my own healing. I started therapy, focusing on the layers of grief, trust, and anger that had built up over the years, not just because of Jasmine's actions, but because of past family tensions and unspoken resentments. I learned to process my emotions without letting them fester, to forgive without forgetting, and to set boundaries that protected both myself and the family. Family dynamics gradually shifted. Jasmine participated in family activities with humility, showing genuine effort to rebuild trust. Cousins and aunts slowly warmed back to her, though some wariness remained. The conversations became gentler, more reflective, and centered on shared memories and mutual support, rather than gossip or judgment. I also found ways to honor Grandma's legacy in new, meaningful traditions. One evening, I gathered a few family members in the living room and shared stories of her kindness, humor, and resilience. We created a memory jar, writing down lessons she had taught us and stories we wanted to pass along. It became a new ritual, a symbol of continuity, remembrance, and the importance of protecting what matters most. As for the ring, I wore it occasionally, but more often I kept it in a special box, a quiet reminder of trust, legacy, and the fragility of relationships. Each time I looked at it, I reflected not on the pain it had caused, but on the lessons it carried: patience, accountability, resilience, and the power of measured, thoughtful action. Months later, when I visited Jasmine in her therapy program, I saw the change more clearly. Her demeanor was calmer, more reflective, and more responsible. She spoke openly about her struggles, acknowledged past mistakes without excuses, and worked diligently to rebuild her life. She wasn't perfect, no one could be, but she was on a path toward integrity and healing. I realized then that betrayal, while painful, can also serve as a catalyst for growth. It exposes hidden weaknesses, demands accountability, and forces reflection. But it also offers a chance for redemption, for forgiveness, and for the rebuilding of stronger, more aware relationships. By the time the next family gathering rolled around, the atmosphere was lighter. The tension that had once hovered like a shadow had dissipated, replaced with cautious optimism and quiet respect. Laughter returned. Hugs were offered freely, and even Jasmine's presence felt less like a burden and more like a reminder of human imperfection and the possibility of recovery. Sitting quietly one evening, holding a cup of tea and listening to the hum of life outside, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for family, for lessons learned, and for the resilience that had carried us through betrayal and back into connection. I understood that healing was not a single moment, but a process, a journey that required honesty, reflection, empathy, and courage. And in that process, we found not only resolution, but wisdom, growth, and the reaffirmation of what truly matters: love, trust, and the enduring bonds of family. As I sit here now, reflecting on the events of that family reunion, I realize how fragile trust can be, and yet how resilient the human heart truly is. Betrayal cuts deeply, yes, but it also teaches us about patience, compassion, and the importance of measured action. It reminds us that people are flawed, mistakes happen, and forgiveness is not weakness, it's strength. Jasmine's choices hurt me, shook our family, and tested every bond we had. But watching her take responsibility, seek help, and slowly rebuild herself has shown me that redemption is possible when honesty and accountability guide the way. It hasn't been easy, and it won't always be simple. But we can choose how to respond. We can choose dignity over anger, healing over resentment, and action over passivity. For me, reclaiming peace meant protecting what I hold dear, speaking truth calmly, and allowing space for growth, even in someone who had betrayed my trust. It meant creating new family traditions, honoring Grandma's memory, and setting boundaries that preserve love without enabling harm. Life is rarely perfect, and people will disappoint. But what matters most is how we rise after the storm, how we rebuild connections, and how we carry the lessons forward with grace. So I leave you with this. What would you do if someone you loved deeply broke your trust? Would you react with anger, or would you choose patience, honesty, and measured action? Sometimes the hardest journeys teach us the most about ourselves and the people we choose to keep close.